Welcome to another Ginger Prince Productions video. This video is looking at some more questions due to the fact that I've just had my new book released, which is this, the Little Book of Unholy Questions. I'm pretty excited about that. Basically, it was originally entitled 501 Questions to Ask God, but I changed the name to the Little Book of Unholy Questions. Just sounds a bit sort of sweeter. I did a video last time on hell. I'm now going to look at some questions about heaven and the problems that there are with the notion of heaven. There are lots of fairly obvious questions like where is heaven? What is it that goes into heaven? Is it your soul? If it is your soul, how does that have anything to do with you as a person, unless it is actually your mind, so on and so forth. And I've already looked at in another video the problem with free will and heaven, and no suffering. If you can have heaven with free will and no suffering, then why do we have suffering on earth if it's a necessary byproduct of free will? And that's a huge problem, but I've looked at that already, so I'm going to look at some different questions tonight about heaven in general, most of which, or all of which, should be covered in my book, so feel free to buy that and look at them in a bit more detail. First of all, I'm going to look at what gets you into heaven and what doesn't. If heaven is an idea of perfection for each person that goes there, I mean, we really don't know what heaven is, and this is half the problem. We're kind of making up stuff so Christians will believe, kind of what they want, really, because there's not really evidence to any great degree in the Bible or anywhere else, so it's a bit ad hoc, a bit sort of made up on the spot. But at some point you've got an arbitrary line which separates someone from just getting into heaven from someone else who doesn't get into heaven, and therefore presumably hell. So what is it? Where is that arbitrary line, and what defines it, where someone is just given salvation and someone is not? And the problem that gives you is the fact that the person that just gets into heaven gets the perfection of heaven, seemingly in exactly the same way as someone that has been totally and utterly amazingly good all their lives. Literally the most perfect human. It seems that person gets exactly the same reward as the person that just gets into heaven, because you've just got two options, heaven and hell. Unless you have degrees of heaven, unless heaven and hell is actually just one long continuum, and your reward or punishment utterly fits your deeds and works on earth, then it seems to be pointless. You've just got a really crappy place and a really amazing place, just two places that can be the end result of a whole wide range of deeds and works that you do on earth. You've got someone that's 1% good going to hell, a person that's 49% good going to hell, 51% good going to heaven, and 99% good going to heaven. It doesn't seem like a just reward for someone that just gets into heaven being given the same reward as someone who clearly sails into heaven. So that's my first question, of which there's no real answer. How is that fair, and how is it that God defines who gets into heaven and who doesn't? Some interesting questions to do with if heaven is so amazing and Christians really believe in heaven, would it not be more sensible for Christians to embrace death, even search it out in the name of God, in order to get there as quickly as possible? And then leading on from that, rather than be sad when a baby, a child, or even an adult dies, should we instead be ecstatically happy that a person will not have to suffer the vagaries of this paltry life and will be in the greatest conceivable place for all eternity. Particularly a baby, we're so sad when babies die, but if you're a Christian and you really believe in heaven, then you should be absolutely happy that that baby doesn't have the chance of becoming a pretty horrible person doing the horrible stuff and therefore going to hell. This baby gets a shortcut straight to heaven, and that's got to be something to be ecstatically happy about. So, if you really do believe in heaven, then these are the sort of emotions that logically you should have when you find out about your baby cousin dying at the age of 2 months or whatever. And in the same way, euthanasia should be acceptable in that light, because you are hastening that person potentially going to heaven. So why spend another 5 years lying in pain in a hospital on this earth when you could be getting that person straight to heaven, greatest possible place, far better than any earthly existence can be. So it seems bizarre that many Christians are against euthanasia. You start getting into weird sort of logical arguments there, where you can think, well, actually, a Christian could be wanting to hasten the death of anyone, by getting them. What's the point of keeping someone here on earth where there's suffering and pain, when it could be somewhere that's infinitely better? So yeah, seems to create quite a lot of problems, heaven. Do you get judged on your actions, your works, or do you just get judged on your faith? So do you need faith in God to get into heaven, or can you get into heaven if you truly are a good person doing morally, wonderful deeds? So that's interesting. Like, is it a prerequisite that you believe in God, or the Judeo-Christian version of God, in order to get into heaven? Or can you be a non-believer that is just a genuinely good person and still get into heaven? And that then leads on to an interesting question. Would God prefer a human that rejects him but leads a really decent, charitable, ethical and fulfilled life, or would God prefer a staunch believer who leads a selfish and more destructive life? So another interesting question there. And then you also get questions to do with heaven, to do with angels. I mean, what are angels? How can they feel if they don't have corporeal bodies? How do they feel pain? Do they feel pain? So the whole notion of angels seems to be quite difficult. And one of the most interesting questions for me, or sets of questions, is at what point in your life do you get judged to go into heaven? So, for example, which one would get into heaven? And this is a bit of a multiple choice question for God. So is it A, a man who does evil for 50 years in unbelief and repents, asks for forgiveness and lives virtuously for 2 months in belief? Or is it B, a man who does virtuous good for 50 years, who then gives up belief and then commits evil for 2 months? Is it both, or is it neither? Surely it should be a cumulative appraisal of what you've done in your life. Just repenting on your deathbed and seeking forgiveness, even if you genuinely repent and you believe in God, should that get you into heaven, given the fact that you've committed 50 years of the most horrendous evil, and then someone else has been good for that length of time and only has a few months of evil and unbelief? One would assume on the normal Christian notion of heaven that they wouldn't get into heaven, but if you look at their whole lives, they've been a far greater credit to society than the other person. So it's really difficult. And then of course you get the problems of if you suffer from dementia for the last 5 years of your life, what is it that gets you into heaven? If it's what you are in here, how you feel on a day-to-day basis, which is the person that commits a deed, a good deed or a bad deed, You do that with your mind, don't you? You're deciding, or supposedly deciding to do these things, and then, so it must be your mind that is your soul. Many people say that it's your soul that gets to heaven. What is your soul? And if it's not causally connected to who you are and the decisions you make, then it's an irrelevant, it's just an irrelevancy. Because the soul, if it doesn't have anything to do with your works and your deeds on earth, then what right does God have to punish or reward it? So your soul must be something to do with your mind. But then if you get dementia for the last 5 years of your life, what is it that you are in heaven? What is the mind that you have in heaven? Is it who you are at the death? Okay, if you get dementia and you've had it for 5 years, does God decide, okay, we're going to take this person, Joe Bloggs, 5 years before he dies? But then why choose that time arbitrarily? Why not choose, if I was really good as a child, then, why not judge me from when I was a child, to go into heaven, rather than me now as an evil person, and then, not that I am, but then, the mind which represents this, the person that you are, is that, when is that mind, the mind that you are in heaven, or when is that being, whatever it is, soul or mind, when it throughout your life is it chosen that's who you are in heaven? And if it isn't your mind or anything like that, then what part of you is it that is in heaven? I don't understand how you can have some kind of sentience in heaven if it isn't your mind. So, and if it isn't when you die, because you have all this problem, people as they get older, they go a bit mental, they just, it would be horrible to be that person in heaven. Last sort of 20 years of an old person's life, psychologically and neuroscientifically, they're not at their peak. So you wouldn't want to be in heaven at that point, and then it just becomes arbitrary. Well, at what point are you chosen, as your true self to go into heaven? It's just so bizarre, this notion of heaven, because it's around every corner there's an issue, there's a problem, and it's not easily resolved, and I can't see any way out of it. It's a logical quagmire of ridiculous ideas and just ad hoc put together without any thoughts. What is a soul? Is that the entity that gets into heaven? How's it connected to you? At what point throughout your life are you chosen as you to go into heaven? If it is anything to do with your brain and mind, it's all just bizarre. And the final question I'm going to ask before I whittle on too much is that if heaven is eternal, going on forever, then philosophically it's pretty much well accepted that boredom, you see, it all comes from goal setting. You set goals and you achieve that, you set a new goal. And you get bored if you set yourself no goals and you have nothing to aim towards. But if you have an eternity, literally an infinite amount of time, then there's no way around the fact that you will get bored. And boredom is seen as philosophically lethal. So basically, it seems like heaven is actually would become some form of hell. What gives us value to our lives is the fact that they are finite, and therefore we desire to do these things, whatever it may be that we desire to do. We are forced to make something of our lives because they are such finite short things. As if they were infinite, you'd be so lethargic about doing anything. Anything could be done. Mañana, whatever. Do it tomorrow. I can't see that heaven can be a viable place if you're existing there for eternity. You would just get bored shitless, so on and so forth. So, and finally, my final question: if Hitler was truly sorry for what he did, would God have forgiven him? Would he have got into heaven on his deathbed if he had repented? You know, just to pick the iconic sort of evil person that we all know about. So basically, yeah, all these and many, many more, it's about 501 questions, are in this book. Don't be shy, you know you want it. And stay tuned for another video some other time.